sometimes I just, even though I don't need to, I throw in some Tagalog words, so I feel like I'm more connected to the Philippines in a way. You know, they see my name in the Grab app and they assume that this is a foreigner that I can take advantage of, and then when I get in the Grab, I start speaking Tagalog with them and they're like, oh, sorry sir, hindi ko alam.
On this episode of the Wineding podcast, we have a special guest. He is a half Swedish, half Filipino engineer, and today he joins us to discuss the importance of learning Tagalog, his thoughts on moving to the Philippines, growing up in Sweden, and culture differences. Without further ado,
please welcome Peter.
As you guys heard in the intro, Peter is half Filipino and half Swedish, and we wanted to bring him on the podcast because for one thing, he's a good friend of ours, and another thing is that we have this theme going on where we're interviewing half Filipinos, and we want to get his take on what it was like growing up in Sweden, as well as what it's like coming to the Philippines, you know, being half Filipino but having not grown up here. And to sort of start this off, we want to ask you a bit like, what are some of the things you think, you know, people don't know about Sweden who live here in the Philippines?
Oh, well, tough question. I think mostly when you hear Sweden outside of Sweden, it's like, oh, this is this progressive country. They have socialism. It's very, very center or left compared to, for example, the US. And I think a lot of people think, oh, but Sweden, I mean, there's no like racism or cultural differences between people. People are just accepting because it's this open country. They have like one of the best like welfare states and whatever. So it's like, but growing up in Sweden, obviously, it's not true. Even though it's better than a lot of countries, I presume, there's still this big cultural difference, and there's still a lot of racism and very what do you call it, white privilege, and so on. And for someone growing up there, being, you know, only half white, it's been very, very clear. Maybe not as obvious when I was growing up, but like later on realizing like about white privilege and how it works, and being like, oh, that's why my friend would treat it differently from me when we were in kindergarten or when we were in like.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main thing, maybe, that people think it's so progressive when it's still, you know, there's ways to go to reach that goal of equality and everything.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing is that no matter where you go, there's still going to be some racism and some discrimination in some form, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to just be it's easy to be on the outside looking in rather than from the inside, you know, seeing what's really happening.
Yeah.
So it's good that you shared that.
I mean, I find that very interesting, but like you mentioned, you know, because you're half white and you're half Filipino, so in Sweden, right, with your parents, like how you grew up, could you give us more context? Because for one of the things that I find, well, kind of unique about you from when I meet other half Filipinos is because you're fluent in English, in Swedish, and in Filipino, but you grew up in Sweden. So can you provide us more context as to?
Yeah, sure. I guess the main difference between me and at least half-Cs, or what you call them, that I know is that like I didn't have that strong of a relationship with my father. My father is Swedish, my mom is Filipina. But growing up, I visited him like once a week max. So I was basically raised by my mom, and so I think I received a lot of the Filipino culture growing up, more so because of it being so just with my mom and everything. And even though it was in Sweden, it was still her who raised me and everything. And so I guess that's why I feel like I'm more connected to the Philippines in a way than maybe if it would have been if it was like, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So there's like less of an influence from your father in your.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So my Swedish influence is like from my friends or from my teachers.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And like, so you're saying that because like when I think of you, Peter, I think you're more, I don't know, you just give me a more, like, you're more Filipino than I would say Swedish, if that makes sense.
Fair.
Growing up in Sweden then, with that, like, you relate more, you connect more to the Philippines, like, was that like even though you grew up there, but did you kind of
Yeah.
feel like you were kind of, I mean, you're different because you're half, but did you feel
Yeah.
more different because of that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've always felt like somewhat of like I'm connecting with Sweden and with my friends in Sweden, but it's like always been like they only see half of me. You could say like I feel like I cannot show them all of me because of the cultural difference and also even though I'm speaking like my mother tongue is Swedish obviously, but with my Tagalog I'm a different person when I speak Tagalog in a way because of the cultural difference and the way I learned Tagalog and in the way I learned Swedish. So it's like it's always been like the part where I'm not really fitting in a way in Sweden, and which is why I've always been like open about maybe someday moving here, and that's why me and my mom are always visiting here because of that difference.
Yeah. I mean, I think I relate a lot to some of the things you mentioned. Well, for one thing, also growing up for me, I visited my dad once a week as well.
Okay.
But completely different in terms of like we were still more so. He was definitely influencing me. But the thing you mentioned about like growing up, you're surrounded by Swedish, but you also felt that you were still different.
Yeah.
Like growing up here, I always felt like I was a foreigner in my home country. And I always felt like going to the U.S. I always visit the same way, similarly to how you feel about the Philippines. I feel that way about the U.S. And so I thought that was like super interesting, because that's exactly how I felt.
Yeah, it's a good explanation. Like foreigner in your home country, it's like Sweden is where I grew up and it's my country, but I don't feel like as proud, I guess. Like I could wave the Filipino flag, but I'm not as excited about waving the Swedish flag.
Yeah. Okay. And do you think because let's say like people would like not really consider you like?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Of course, it's been like growing up. That's been a theme. Like, oh, where are you from? And I say like the city I'm from in Sweden. And like, no, but where are you from?
Exactly.
Like, I'm born here, and I have like this super duper common Swedish name, and that's like a thing for my friends to make fun of me about, because it's funny because like when you hear my name in Sweden, it's like, oh, there's gotta be like this 70-year-old white dude, because he's like an old name as well. So it's like so it's like always a fun thing when I speak.
And then you show up, you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Well, in Tagalog, maybe you can give us a few Tagalog skills.
Phrases.
No, but like so with the Philippines, right? Because like with our experience with DECA, as you already know, because we've been here for like 12, 13 years, right? And we're fluent also in Hiligaynon because we're living here with our mom and stuff, and we're in a very provincial area, whatever. But the culture difference, I think, was really still like major until now for me, like comparing Nigeria to the Philippines. So when you're like visiting here, do you like what's your main culture shocks about the Philippines, like the Filipino culture, things that you like and that you don't like?
Well, I mean, there's obviously privilege being half white. That I mean, it's very clear when I'm here that people treat me differently because of, I mean, the color of my skin, and me obviously looking. I mean, it's obvious that I'm half when people see me, so they treat me differently. Which is, of course, I mean, it's nice, but it's weird in a way as well, because I know the other side of it when I'm in Sweden, so it's like, okay. But that's also like, well, selfishly, why I like Philippines more, because I get treated better, so it's like, obviously. But no, so mostly the cultural difference is like, they see my name in the Grab app, and they assume that this is a foreigner that I can take advantage of, and then when I get in the Grab, I start speaking Tagalog with them, and they're like, oh, sorry sir, hindi ko alam na marunong ka pala Tagalog. Kala ko mag-nosebleed ako. And it's like, oh yeah, I can speak. And it's also, I think that's helped me a lot, because it's like, I think when I speak it, people, they don't try to take advantage of me.
They respect you more.
Yeah, they're like, oh, okay, you know the culture, maybe I cannot trick you, I cannot ask. So it's like, I sometimes I just, even though I don't need to, I throw in some Tagalog words so that people know that I can speak
don't
Tagalog.
fuck with me because I can speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. No, same for, I mean, like for us when we're going like when we're in the Grab or like let's say you travel to like Boracay or something and you take a tricycle and you see you're a foreigner, you're like, oh, this is like, you know,
Yeah.
the 13th month or Christmas bonus because you know.
Exactly.
And then I'm like, I think Koreans are like, oh, we were
Exactly.
Thailand next time naman. So like yeah, the Tagalog would help you with trying not to get scammed. So,
Yeah.
but that's very interesting. I guess one question for you, Peter, is as you mentioned, there's a cultural difference with Philippines and Sweden.
Yeah.
But so those are like the positive things. Would you say there's anything negative about the Philippines or anything that you find that they do it better in Sweden?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I still think that with everything being said about Sweden and they're still being white privilege and everything, I still think it's night and day between Philippines and Sweden. I mean, Sweden has, I would say, is a lot more accepting than what the Philippines has been. In the way of like, in the Philippines you want to be white, you put on lotion that makes you whiter, whatever. It's like still a huge. I think it's a huge damage from the colonialism, I believe. But in Sweden, even though I've experienced it, it's still like so night and day from what I've known you guys have experienced from being dark skinned in the Philippines. So it's like I would still say that Philippines has a long way to go when it comes to like just in general like acceptance and accepting other cultures and accepting other people, I think.
Interesting. Thanks so much for sharing, Peter.
I have a question. So with that being said, given that like Sweden is sort of, they have good welfare, they have basically they have the money to be able to take care of people. You think that plays a big role in that, in the reason why Sweden is so night and day with the Philippines in terms of like how people are treated?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think it's in the Philippines there's it's a big gap between the rich and the poor, right? There's still that gap in Sweden, but it's between like middle class and rich instead. So it's like in Sweden, even though there is people that are homeless, there's like very 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 few, and it's like school is free, dentist is free, hospital is free. So it's like when you go to college, the state pays you to go to college instead of like here you have to pay to go to college, right? So it's like obviously I think that has a lot of it has a lot to do also with like progress in general. I think like here it's more like get to your next meal kind of thing. So it's not, you don't focus about,
you can't focus
personal growth. It's not a focus like
they have other problems to
worry
about.
Yeah, I think that's that has a lot to do with it as well. Yeah,
that's a good point, Peter, because this is something we haven't really talked a lot about on our other previous podcasts. Like we talked a lot about how there's like discrimination. There's certain things that people are like missing here. They're not as sensitive or as aware of here. But if you think about it, they don't have the liberty to be aware, or most people don't have the liberty to be aware. You have to be in a place of privilege to start thinking about personal growth. It's really hard to think of personal growth when you're like what Peter said, you're looking for your next meal. It's a lot harder to do that.
I think so.
Yeah, and like speaking of that, like coming from privilege and like personal growth, I was gonna mention this as well because I know like you have, your most. So if your family are from the Philippines, if you're more close to your mom's side.
Yeah.
And a theme that I wanted to mention, like in the other channels, was like financial education, right? So would you say that in the Philippines, like from a Filipino, is there like a difference, or are you as close with your dad's side to gauge that difference about financial education?
No, that's the thing. Yeah. So me not being that close to my dad, he wasn't even like he didn't have no contact with his family, so his side of the family.
Okay.
So there's no one, like he was adopted. So who was my grandma and grandpa in Sweden, they were his adoptive parents, and they passed away before I was like 2, so I never like met them. My mom met them, But then there was like no one, like his real, his biological family. He has no contact with. So there was no side of that family. It was only him. And so in here, it's like my mom has like 8 siblings or something, and like they all have kids and they have kids. So it's like this is like the huge family. So that's also a big reason why I love the Philippines so much, is because this is where my family is. Like when I'm in Sweden, it's me, my mom, and my stepdad. Like so it's definitely different. Yeah. So, but to answer your question, what was it about financial education? Yeah. No, I mean, there was like no way for me to gauge the difference, I guess, more than like coming here and growing up and getting like becoming more, you know, aware and seeing the difference, and I guess that's also like a thing I always talk to my friends about. They're like, oh, you send money to your family every month? That's so weird. Like, because there in Sweden, it's like, you're 18, you move out. Then you start your own life. It's like, you know, your parents, they have well-paid jobs. They stop supporting you. You have an account that they have saved since you were like a baby, and you're well off, even if you're just starting to do college. You're well off, you know. But for me, it's like my mom she's a janitor, so one of the lowest paying jobs in Sweden, and she just, you know, worked for every meal and worked for every, you know, was like tight every month for us. And then my dad was a lawyer, and so he had a lot of money, and he would, you know, support me from time to time, but in ways like superficial ways, like buying me toys. You know, so it was like, no, there was no, you know, bank account that I could feed off of when I was. So it motivated me a lot too, in ways like I know how difficult it is here with my family and how they're struggling to get the next meal, and how privileged I am to be in Sweden, where it's free education and it's you know, we have all the opportunities in the world. So it's like pushed me to, you know, finish high school, finish college, get a nice well-paid job, and you know, start to contribute, because my mom, she sends what little she can every month to her mom before she passed away, my Lola, and then now her sister and her brothers. And so I guess I think it's hard for people, like many of my friends in Sweden who doesn't travel a lot and who doesn't know, they can't comprehend. Like it's very narrow-minded in a way. It's not their fault, and that's the way we grew up in Sweden. It's like you have everything, right? But if you for me, like when I went to Philippines, I see how it is and how hard it is for people here, and so I guess that kind of helped me in a way to be more compassionate, I guess, and more like understanding of like, I don't mind paying higher taxes, because if I earn more, then I should pay more, whatever, stuff like that. So, I don't want to get political, but
interesting. Because I asked that because now when I'm talking to you more, like right now with this topic, I kind of relate to you like more as well, because, you know, so our dad is Nigerian, our mom was Filipina, and when we were in Nigeria, it was just the 5 of us. When we moved here, it was like 100 other people. And then we saw like actively how our mom was sending money to the family when she was still alive. But then at the same time, I guess it's nice to hear your perspective, because I just before this like question I had a different other perspective, but now I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But before I had no tolerance with like, you know, family leeching on family just to, you know. But I guess
I think there's a line between leeching and helping other people, right?
An obligation, or like
one can lead to another, right? If you help someone, then eventually they start taking it as like, oh, I don't have to do anything.
They don't learn to appreciate the stuff you do.
We'll talk about this on another, because this is a really good topic, I think, because I've heard that, you know, most of my friends, you know, also experience this, and most of people like, you know, we as well, so stay tuned. But back to Peter. Let's talk about like, I think that with like, because I remember, you know, in our previous episode we also interviewed Hannah, who's taking like you as well, half Filipino, half Swedish, but like, you know, 2 different scenarios, so it just kind of like emphasizes the different people, different perspective, different experience, right? But like to summarize, you know, you're half Filipino, half Swedish journey, being because you primarily live in Sweden, right? You're just visiting in the Philippines.
Yeah.
You did mention you have plans of moving here. So in the event that, let's say, you did move here, right? Do you think that there would be any instance of, say, for example, because you technically know both languages, but is there still part of you that would like, I think I'm better off in Sweden, or do you think the Philippines is the place that, you want to settle down and you want to migrate back? I don't know.
I go back and forth, I think. Because okay, so to bring it back to my mom and my dad, they separated when I was 3.
Okay.
And so she had a decision ahead of her. She wasn't a Swedish citizen yet. It was like, okay, do I stick it out here in a country where I don't know anybody, my family is not here, or do I go back and take my son back to the Philippines? And for her, it was like an easy decision. She was like, no, the future for my son is here. There's more chance of him succeeding here, so I'm gonna stay here. And obviously that helped me, because I wouldn't be as well off as you could say today if she brought me back to the Philippines. And that's what I've been contemplating as well, because I prefer being here, and I like the version I am when I am here, I guess, in a weird way. But also I've also wondered okay, so when I have kids,
where are you
do we want to have them here, or do we want to have them? But it's it's different now, right? Because my mom, she was poor, and she came to Sweden, and even though she has one of the lowest paying jobs, it's still a lot of money here, right? But I'm not in that position, I guess. So if I have kids, and if I manage to get a job, let's say in the Philippines, it's probably gonna be a pretty well paid job with my education, right? So it's different. So I think growing up here with, or raising my children here, I guess, it would be different, much like I guess for you guys with you being raised in Philippines, right?
I mean, I think one thing to bring up for me that I related with you just now was that as much as I wanted to go, I was seeking the U.S. the same way you were seeking the Philippines. I don't really want to leave the Philippines. It's more I want to have a base somewhere here and somewhere else as well.
Yeah.
Just because of the way I felt, growing up here a bit, right? But then I still feel I'm definitely Filipino. I'm definitely different from other American people I've met, because I like to think sometimes growing up I was oh, I'm more American than Filipino. That's how I sort of was taught a bit. But then I went to the U.S. and I was oh no, I'm definitely my own breed of person. I'm my own breed of person. There's no one else who went through my life and stuff. As much as there's a lot of American Filipinos, but just sort of everyone's their own unique person, their own unique experience.
And I think it's unique then that also that you were raised. I think a lot of American Filipinos are raised in the U.S.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But yeah, so I go back and forth, as I said. But I feel I want to move here. I feel I don't think I would have any problems. My Tagalog is good enough for me to be understood and to understand. So it's I feel I don't have an issue there. But yeah, I guess it all comes down to what happens, who I meet, and we will see where we go from there. It's it changes from year to year.
Definitely agree.
Definitely figuring that last part. I mean, it's not really, in the end, it doesn't boil down to logistics. It's more about how you feel. Right?
Yeah.
How you feel and what are your other options.
Yeah, right? What you wanted 5 years ago might be different from what you want now.
Exactly. And like you said, I always want to have a base in both countries, right? So even though it's easier to have a base in the Philippines because my family is here, right? I have my friends in Sweden, and even if I live in the Philippines, I'm gonna be frequently visiting Sweden, right? Visiting my family, my friends, and so on. And depending on what my mother chooses to do, she might be in Sweden, So it's
okay. Okay. Well, this was great. To be honest, this was very insightful, and I learned a lot today. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining. We're gonna put his Instagram here if you guys want to follow and
It's private, but you can
you can do that. Let's see if you're looking at that one.
There'll also be the link in the description. you know.
And yeah, thank you again, Peter. And
Thanks for having me.
yeah.
Salamat.
Salamat. Thank
Ingat
you
kayo
so much.
lagi.
Guys.
Ingat kayo lagi.
Hello.